The moment Officer Trent Maddox saw the 2 silver stars on the Admiral's collar, his smirk evaporated. His hand froze mid-adjustment on his duty belt, and for the first time in his career on Blackwater Road, he understood that the men he had mocked, handcuffed, and paraded into a holding cell were not powerless strangers passing through his county, but highly trained Navy SEALs whose silence had never been fear. It had been discipline, and the reckoning now walking through the courthouse doors would unravel everything he thought he controlled. But 12 hours earlier, under a sky thick with Alabama humidity, Maddox had been king of a lonely stretch of asphalt just outside Harlow County, parked beneath a dying street lamp, with his cruiser angled like a spider waiting in its web, radar gun balanced in one hand, and a lukewarm gas station coffee in the other, telling himself that out-of-state plates were easy pickings, and that tonight he'd pad his arrest numbers before midnight. And when the charcoal gray SUV glided past at 64 in a 55, the soft chirp of the radar might as well have been a starting pistol. He flipped on his lights, red and blue strobes slicing through the pine trees lining Blackwater Road, and muttered, "Got you," as if he had just intercepted a shipment of contraband instead of a family vehicle returning to Florida. While inside the SUV, Marcus Hale kept both hands steady at 10 and 2, eyes forward, voice calm as he told his passenger, Devin Brooks, 5. Over. That's the excuse. And Devin, taller, broader, with the stillness of a man trained to slow his heartbeat on command, nodded once and replied, "Windows down. Dome light on." Because both men understood the rules of surviving a late-night stop in a county that didn't feel welcoming. And though neither wore a uniform at that moment, both carried the invisible bearing of elite operators accustomed to danger far greater than a traffic citation. Maddox approached slowly, boots crunching gravel, flashlight beams sweeping aggressively across the interior, as if searching for an enemy combatant instead of 2 compliant motorists, and he paused deliberately at the passenger window, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably long before saying, "Evening, boys. Y'all in a hurry?" His tone less greeting than accusation, Marcus answering respectfully, "No, sir. Just heading back to Florida." And Devin adding nothing, simply watching Maddox's hands, because hands were what mattered, and Maddox didn't like the composure, didn't like the absence of stuttering or visible fear, didn't like that the 2 black men in front of him sat upright, shoulders squared, eyes steady, as if they were evaluating him instead of the other way around. "License and registration," he snapped, and Marcus narrated his movements before reaching for the center console. "Registration's in here, officer," because he had learned long ago that clarity reduced risk, but Maddox's jaw tightened anyway, and when he leaned closer, shining the flashlight directly into Devin's face, he inhaled theatrically and declared, "Smells like weed." Though there was no scent but leather upholstery and pine sap drifting from the roadside, and Devin answered evenly, "There are no drugs in this vehicle," which only seemed to irritate Maddox further, his ego bristling at the contradiction, and within seconds he escalated, ordering both men out of the SUV, claiming probable cause, hands hovering near his holster as though expecting resistance. Marcus stepped out first, tall but lean, hands raised and visible, Devin following with measured movements, and under the harsh glow of the cruiser's spotlight the contrast became obvious. 2 physically imposing men standing calmly, while a shorter officer puffed himself up to fill the space, kicking Marcus's feet apart during the pat-down with unnecessary force, muttering, "You boys from Miami or something?" and ignoring the military IDs briefly visible in Marcus's wallet when it opened for his driver's license, dismissing them with a scoff. "Cute props," as if the Department of Defense hologram were a novelty sticker, when the search of the SUV yielded nothing. No paraphernalia, no residue, no suspicious containers. Maddox's expression shifted from confident to calculating, because letting them go now would bruise his pride, and pride in Harlow County was currency, so he turned away momentarily, body blocking the view from his dash camera, and reached into his vest pocket where a small evidence baggie rested like an insurance policy, then bent into the back seat near a duffel bag and wedged the packet between the cushions before straightening up with a triumphant flourish, holding the bag aloft under the flashing lights as though he had discovered buried treasure. "Well, look at that," he announced loudly, cocaine, intent to distribute. "You're done." And Marcus stared at the bag without blinking, heart steady, mind analyzing, recognizing the telltale stiffness of planted evidence, recognizing also that this confrontation was not tactical but political, and quietly said, "That is not ours." While Devon's gaze locked onto the dashcam lens, silently memorizing angles and timestamps, because both men understood something Maddox did not. That discipline sometimes meant allowing injustice to expose itself fully, and so they did not resist as cuffs clicked around their wrists, did not argue as Maddox recited charges he embellished on the spot, did not react when he shoved them toward the cruiser and bragged, "You picked the wrong county to run your hustle." Because inside that cramped back seat, as the cruiser pulled away from Blackwater Road toward the Harlow County Jail, Marcus leaned slightly toward Devon and murmured, "Chain of command will notice," and Devon replied, almost amused, "They always do," while up ahead. Maddox drove with a satisfied grin, unaware that within hours a commander at Naval Amphibious Base Little Creek would flag 2 missing operators, unaware that a secure line would connect to Rear Admiral Thomas Vance, unaware that the silence in his rearview mirror was not submission but the calm before a storm, wearing dress whites and 2 silver stars. And as the jail doors clanged shut behind Marcus Hale and Devon Brooks, Officer Trent Maddox believed he had just secured the biggest arrest of his career, not realizing he had instead triggered the first domino in a collapse that would reach from his modest patrol cruiser all the way to a federal courtroom where the word reckoning would no longer be metaphor but verdict. By sunrise, the illusion of control in Harlow County was already cracking, though Officer Trent Maddox still strutted through the sheriff's office boasting about his major trafficking arrest, unaware that at Naval Amphibious Base Little Creek, 2 missing operators had triggered a quiet but unstoppable chain reaction. Lieutenant Commander Aaron Whitfield had watched the GPS tracker freeze over Harlow County at 0047 hours and immediately understood that Marcus Hale and Devon Brooks were not simply delayed, they were detained. So he placed a secure call to Rear Admiral Thomas Vance, who responded with chilling brevity, "Prepare the aircraft." And within hours a Gulfstream carrying Vance, 2 senior JAG officers, and a team from the Naval Criminal Investigative Service was airborne, while back in Alabama Marcus and Devon sat in a holding cell denied phone calls, listening to Maddox laugh in the booking area as District Attorney Clifford Pike praised the arrest and promised to seek no bail, neither local official bothering to verify the military identification cards logged into evidence, dismissing them as fake props. At 10:12 a.m. the shackled SEALs were led into Judge Eldon Mercer's courtroom, where Pike requested immediate remand and Maddox stood confidently near the prosecution table, arms crossed, certain the story would hold. And when Marcus calmly stated, "Not guilty, Your Honor, and our command is aware of this detention," a few spectators chuckled, but the laughter died abruptly when the courtroom doors burst open and Rear Admiral Thomas Vance entered in full dress whites, 2 silver stars gleaming under fluorescent lights, NCIS agents at his back, the atmosphere shifting from routine arraignment to something far heavier as Vance advanced down the aisle without raising his voice and said evenly, "Your Honor, you are detaining 2 active-duty Navy SEAL operators on fabricated charges," before placing a file on the defense table and outlining evidence already reviewed mid-flight. Dash camera footage showing a 12-second manual deactivation before the alleged drug discovery, lab numbers linking the cocaine to a prior seizure logged by Maddox, inconsistencies between GPS timestamps and the arrest report. Each fact delivered with calm precision that drained the color from Maddox's face and left Pike fumbling for jurisdictional arguments. And as NCIS agents moved to secure recordings and request federal custody, the small-town confidence that had fueled the previous night's roadside arrogance evaporated, replaced by a heavy silence in which it became unmistakably clear that Blackwater Road no longer belonged to Officer Maddox, and that the men he had assumed were powerless strangers were, in fact, backed by an institution that did not bluff, did not guess, and did not lose. The fallout moved fast once Rear Admiral Thomas Vance stepped into that courtroom, because the moment the fabricated charges were exposed, Officer Trent Maddox's authority evaporated and was replaced by handcuffs of his own, courtesy of the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, who escorted him not back to patrol, but into an interrogation room where dash cam locks, body cam gaps, and lab reports were laid out in front of him like a checklist of his undoing. The 12-second camera deactivation before the discovery of narcotics became the thread that unraveled everything. And when federal agents executed a warrant at his home later that day, they uncovered additional drugs, unreported cash, and firearms tied to prior questionable arrests, expanding what Maddox thought was a single bold lie into a years-long pattern of corruption. District Attorney Clifford Pike attempted to distance himself in front of reporters, but internal emails showing pressure to increase out-of-state seizures quickly surfaced, triggering a Department of Justice review into Harlow County's prosecutorial practices, while Judge Mercer announced an abrupt retirement as civil rights investigators began reopening dozens of cases linked to Maddox's arrests. Meanwhile, Marcus Hale and Devin Brooks, released under federal authority, declined interviews despite their story spreading across networks like CNN, because what captured the public wasn't drama, it was restraint, the undeniable contrast between roadside aggression and disciplined silence. Within months, over 80 convictions connected to Maddox were overturned due to compromised evidence, and the former officer, once confident he owned Blackwater Road, stood before a federal judge in Montgomery and accepted a plea deal that resulted in a 20-year sentence, denied bail, and remanded to protective custody. A stark reversal for a man who had weaponized the badge he wore. Marcus and Devin quietly returned to duty at Naval Amphibious Base Little Creek ***, where Admiral Vance commended not their strength, but their control, reminding them that true power is measured not by force used, but by force restrained. And in the end, the greatest consequence of that night was not just a conviction, but reform. New oversight policies in Harlow County, reopened cases, and a legal defense fund supported by the settlement Hale and Brooks directed toward those who never had an Admiral walk through the courtroom doors for them, proving that even on the darkest stretch of highway, authority answers to something higher.